Okay, there we go. So why don't you start over?
Sure. So I finally found out what it feels like to um, go into a sit, not have expectations, and instead of kind of reminiscing over how I got to the point or what thought led me to mind wandering and how I got there, and kind of like trying to piece together the however amount of time I wasn't present. I finally kind of was able to let that go and just kind of, it's not necessarily about that. It's about the fact that you caught it. And that's the part you need to be happy about because, as we discussed previously, that's success. And actually getting that was very important because it helped me understand the importance of building momentum on top of that. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you continually do that, there's a certain amount of momentum that builds, and then that's the thing I'm noticing more is if I can just keep that momentum going, then that's what leads to more success, and more success is just a matter for me of getting that momentum built. And the other part is just not having expectations. That was really big. And it was difficult for me to do that because I had been practicing for so long and I was frustrated because I didn't get anywhere. But what's the point in being frustrated and having expectations? I mean, I'm at where I'm at, and being upset over that isn't going to make any difference. I just have to accept where I am and go into each sit not expecting anything, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Mm-hmm.
Exactly so. Um, I'm reminded of a line art, a drawing that I have seen before. And basically, what it is that it's a wagon that is stuck, say, stuck in the mud. And 10 people are trying to push the wagon out of the mud, and they're getting no success. And they're working very hard at it, and each one is pushing and pushing, but they're all surrounding the wagon, and each one is pushing in a different direction. All
Yeah.
right. And that this is normally, I mean, this is a clear example of line art of what they mean by herding cats,
Uh-huh.
and that the idea of it is that this is politics in the sense of every political party or faction of the political party wants to push the country one
Okay.
direction or another, and so they're all over the place and getting nowhere.
Mhm.
But really, there's another way of looking at this line art, and that is that it's the human mind, and that there are various forces within the human mind that push us one direction and another, or whatnot like that. And that basically, uh, there are two major forces, and that religion has talked about them for forever. When we get the major forces, let us say at the very, very basic, ordinary level of misunderstanding the way that humans do, we look at it from the sense of right and wrong, good and bad, uh, uh, good and evil, holy and devilish, or whatever like that. But really, what's going on is the distinction between ignorance and wisdom, or seeing and not seeing. That's the real uh, force within us. So that, for instance, the wiser that we get, the less competitive we are, because competition is built really into our culture, and that. Um, by the way, one of the things that I have seen um, around religious organizations, zendos, Thai temples, other things like this, especially in the situation with Watsu and Moke over the years, there's been many, many Westerners there. And that one of the, let us say it like this, one of the major hallmarks of my relationship with Santikaro back in the 1980s when both of us were monks at Wat Suan Mok was competition. That was the distinct, or that was our relationship. And that I find now many new people coming to Wat Suan Mok, staying for a long time, absolutely devoting their lives to the Dhamma. Monks 10 years. I mean, this kind of quality of dedication. And yet, the primary relationships that we as Westerners have with each other in the Dhamma is one of competition.
That's funny. Yeah.
And I see this. And yet, it looks like that after many, many, many years of the Dhamma, when someone gets into old age with it, they recognize that this is ridiculous. That in fact, everything about the Buddha and the way the Sangha was set up and all about it has two qualities that are absolutely essential. One is absolute honesty with one another, and the other one is absolute friendship with one another, with the concept of Kalyametta, that all of the monks in the time of the Buddha called each other friend. I think that in modern language we would use the word brother.
Uh-huh.
Uh, uh, in the sense that we have common goals, but we have to find a way of taking the competition out of it. Now, going back to the quality of pushing on the wagon, the way that I was mentioning before, there are qualities within each one of us that compete with each other. We wind up being that crowd around that wagon, or at least pushing it in two different opposite directions. And that can be boiled down to, are we going to do things instinctually, or the way that I have learned to live, operate? Oh, you got the black cat now.
He wanted to come up.
I saw him behind you, but I hadn't mentioned it yet. Um, so we have, let us say, these first three fetters that everyone starts out with. No one starts out noble. Everyone starts out with these three basic fetters. And then, in fact, we don't really even understand correctly what the higher fetters are until we've learned to deal with these first three. All right. The first three would be personality. Who am I? What am I? How do I fit in? What was I in the past? What will I be in the future? What's to become of me? Uh, in the song of Que Sera Sera, you probably heard that one out in the 1950s, Doris Day. Que Sera Sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que Sera Sera. It starts off the verse. When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, "What would I be? Will I be? Will I see rainbows? Will I be rich?" And here's what she said to me: "Que sera sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera sera." And yet, in the West, we send our children to school with great expectations of the future.
Yeah.
If you can't learn the alphabet, you can't read. If you can't read, you can't learn. If you can't learn, you can't graduate. If you can't graduate, you can't go to university. If you can't go to university, you can't get a job.
That's so
All right. Yes, and so we have not just the internal stuff with me, who am I, me, my selfishness, and all of that, but it is built into our society. The expectations of the teachers, the expectations of everything, that our societies have great expectations for each one of us. And so those expectations, the Buddha used the term sila bhatta paramasa. Sila Bhatta Paramasa means attachments to rites, rules, and rituals. You can see that this is actually instinctual, and it comes from the nesting instinct. Why? Because all mammals nest together. One of the primary instincts of dogs who live together is that they will sleep together quite often. That's why the dog wants to sleep on the bed. He doesn't want to sleep on the bed because the bed is comfortable. He wants to sleep on the bed because that's where the boss sleeps.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they will sit on the couch not because they like the couch. It's because the boss is. That's where the boss is.
Yeah.
And so they're easy to be taught to get off the couch,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to get them to stay off the bed
Mm-hmm.
because it's instinctual.
Yeah.
All right. And the instinct has to do with safety. That generally the night is dangerous. Sleeping time is dangerous. We want to be around security, but if we're going to be around one another, we've got to learn to cooperate.
I see.
Okay, that basic instinct that you see in the foxhole or in the wolf den or in that leaf collection that the monkeys do in the top of the tree, those things are the source for human civilization. Human civilization is nothing but the planet Earth has become a great big nest for humans. And we have to learn to get along with each other. All right. And so the ability to get along to a point is instinctual to follow the rules. Unfortunately, you can actually go so far as to look at it like this: that wrong view leads to anarchy, chaos, pillage, pestilence, death, war, all of that. A good society then keeps many of those things at bay. It keeps us out of famine. It keeps us in peace. We can cooperate together. So that would be society at a good place as opposed to bad. But unfortunately, the society doesn't do all of its job because it's still based in ordinary right view and is still subject to suffering. That no one is free from suffering by following anybody's rules.
Mm-hmm.
Not completely free from suffering. We can only get ourselves free from obvious suffering. All right. So the next one, then, the third fetter, is doubt, but most specifically, it's doubt about. I'll say it like this because it's in the sutras this way. It's doubt about what is the path and what is not the path to life. In other words, all of our insecurities, all of our uncertainties. But once the mind has eradicated doubt, that means that in the Buddha Sangha, that means that someone really knows the Eightfold Noble Path. They understand beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is my path in life. I am not going to go, say, join the Russian mob.
Right.
That's not my path.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
That becoming a priest, becoming a strap-on bomber. None of these are the right path. That the right path for me is the Eightfold Noble Path based upon doubt. So we have these three primary instincts that when we can become free of them, that marks the point of nobility because the people who do not have these three primary fetters are the instinct of the self, the instinct of the nest, and basic ignorance or doubt about what's to be done. Uh, in fact, in frustration and whatnot like that. Here's an example of that. On the sport field or on the highway, you have an accident of some description or another, and that the major suffering that the person is going to have is not the suffering of the broken arm or the actual wound, The real suffering comes in what's to become of me.
Yeah.
What's to become of me? Where's the ambulance? Are they going to come? Is there anybody around? I need help, etc., like that. And so that's the major cause of suffering, is that doubt. Now, a really, really super Dhamma dude, if he was in that situation, he'll say, well, at least I'm still alive. Never mind. We'll just kind of wait here and see what happens. He's not going to burn his mind just because the body has a broken kneecap or other things like this. Okay, so that's the kind of way of looking at it, is that we add so much mental suffering to everything that happens
Yeah.
because of this issue of doubt. We're not sure. And so by working through that, um, and one student said when I was talking to him, he says, "Oh, before when you were talking about Sila Bhatta Paramasa, I was thinking about it in the sense of lighting candles and incense and doing all of the rituals that are associated with religion or Buddhism or whatever like that, all of the trinkets or associations around meditation, that those things are not of any value."
Uh,
But what I really was explaining is that anything that is ritualized is of no value, really. All of our little rituals. Now, there are some kind of rituals that we have that have to do with establishing rapport. But once the rapport is established, then the ritual is over. Like, how you going? We have a little ritual. Every student has a slightly different ritual, but every student on Skype will have a little ritual at the beginning to establish rapport.
I
But we
see.
don't. But we don't spend the rest of the hour with that stupid ritual of
Yeah.
over and over again of hi, how you doing?
Small talk. Yeah.
Yeah, the small talk, exactly.
Uh,
Small talk is actually ritual establishment. And
uh-huh.
that when people get into Alzheimer or advanced old age, they will actually retreat to those things because they're easy to remember,
Hmm.
because that's what we do with everything. So you call a great aunt on the phone and she'll say, "Oh, well, hi, how you doing?" "I'm fine." "How old are you?" And you say, "I'm 74." And then she says, "How are you? What do you do? How old are you?
That's interesting. Yeah.
How old is your daughter?" You
Yeah.
know, all kinds of little ritual things, and they'll come down to like 4 or 5 questions, and the whole conversation is you answering over and over again the same 4 or 5 questions.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of when it gets really advanced, but you can see that it's built in that ritualized or that repetitive behavior that we have. And so that's what's left of the mind of someone with Alzheimer's, is that their brain is just going back to those basic routine things. Now, what that means is that for us as Dhamma dudes, we need to wake up to see all of that kind of stuff. And by doing so, we get a deeper understanding of who I am, and most specifically, what I'm not. And in fact, the better way of looking at it, and I've heard about this for so many years, everything about Buddhism is upside down, backwards, or in the negative, in the sense that Christianity promises you heaven, but Buddha doesn't promise you anything other than the removal of defilements. Okay? We don't give any prizes. What we do is eliminate.
Uh-huh.
All right? So, in the sense of the self, we're not, in fact, going to be able to figure out who we are. All we're going to be able to do is to figure out who we are not.
Mm.
Who we are not. All right? Who you are not is everything you thought you were.
Yeah.
And that this is why the Buddha there's a whole group of things around it, around seclusion. And the idea of seclusion is to get away from society, even for the 30 minutes or an hour that we're sitting, that we're secluded from society. But going to a retreat gets us really secluded from society so that we can, in fact, begin to see what is me and what is not me. What is the clutter that I have allowed into my mind that's been there long enough that I think that it belongs here?
Mm, gotcha.
All right. And so uh, when we work with personality view, we come to understand that I am not what I was taught I was. I am not those things. And what it boils down to, and a lot of people don't like it, so we need to take them in stages, is that you're an electrochemical mechanical machine with bad programming.
Conditioned.
Bad, right. You're nothing but AI, only our A is bigger than the machine's A. Ours is really artificial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we were programmed by society.
It's weird. Yeah.
We were not programmed by excellent computer scientists who've been working for the past 50 years to develop AI. Ours came up naturally. It took what? Something between 100,000 and 40 million years,
Uh-huh.
and it's still a work in progress.
Yeah.
So, um, much of what Western civilization does is it gives the child or the individual an overinflated idea of who we are, and that we start off as children in the one down position. The children are smaller. They don't have hand coordination. Adults will speak at a language level that the child doesn't understand. And not only that, but the adults treat children like they were property. And so every child in Western society is raised as a victim. The existential life position that I'm not okay, but the rest of the world is okay.
Hmm. I know what you mean. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Eric Byrne talked about this in the sense of the okay corral. I'm okay, you're okay, and the world is either not okay or okay. And the victim's position is I'm not okay, but the world is okay.
Yeah.
The CEO's position is I'm okay, but the world is not okay, and I'm going to make a fortune off of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
The position of I'm not okay and the world is not okay is generally where people wind up in prison.
Mm. That makes sense.
Hmm. And so the last position of I'm okay, you're okay means we're dudes, we're buddies, we're friends together.
Yeah.
And so we begin to see the whole world like that. But the first thing that we have to do is to get out of the position that I'm not okay and come to the position that I am okay.
Mm.
And we need to practice that from day one of meditation practice. And you were just mentioning that's actually the very first thing that we have to do is when the beginning student recognizes that the mind has wandered away, he needs to do that with the change of attitude to be a winner.
Mm.
Aha, I caught you. There you go. I know what that mind is doing, etc., like that. Joyous response
Yeah.
rather than the normal response of the Westerner who is a victim of, dang, there it goes again.
Yeah.
These minds are so hard. Monkey mind, that's.
I love how you say that.
And basically, that comes from an over inflated self view that each person willingly picks up from society, but they pick it up and still maintain the position of victim. So we wind up then feeling like we're losers because we cannot make even our own expectations. And so when the mind wanders away, we feel bad. Wherein, in fact, the actual instructions, if you look very closely detailed, the very basic instruction for the brand new student, the first time he sits down, actually requires 4 points of the Eightfold Noble Path. That the part that we can leave out are the parts, especially the three about right view, excuse me, um, right action, right speech, and right livelihood, because those things in seclusion are automatically taken care of. I'm not talking, therefore my speech is wonderful. I'm not doing anything, therefore my behavior is wonderful. I'm not making any money right now, so my livelihood is wonderful. So we could just throw those things out, at least on a temporary basis, until we can get down to the real heart of the real core of things. Now, the first thing is not only on the noble path, but even on the regular path. Normally, the regular path is pointed out to start out with sila, samadhi, panya. And sila means that, at least in this regard, that you're in the meditation hall. You're not out there robbing a bank. You're not out there screaming at your mother-in-law. You're sitting. So in that regard, your sila is now perfect. Then the next thing that you do is that you develop samadhi, which means that you have some mental control, and that will give you panya. So the regular, ordinary Buddhist religion path is listed as sila, samadhi, panya. But the noble path is listed as panya, sila, samadhi. But in fact, even on the noble path, you have to have right view or some wisdom from the very beginning. In other words, the student is not even going to come into the meditation hall and sit down unless he thinks he's going to get some value in it. Or another way of saying it, that he recognizes that there is some suffering in my life that can be eliminated. So he's actually got to start with some kind of right view. And I have seen students who want to do meditation, but when they come to that point of recognizing that when the mind wanders away and they don't like it, then their position is, well, I would rather sit here and put in my hour and get credit on the cosmic clock for an hour of meditation.
Yeah.
While I am not actually going to be doing the practice because it's painful and it takes a lot of work.
That was me.
Okay. That was the wrong attitude. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, or not a wrong attitude, but wrong view. We're having the wrong view about it. Well, the right view would be I am happier when my mind is free from hindrances. Therefore, let me have a mind free from hindrance. So that's the original number one right view, is that I hurt, I suffer, and I want to get out of it. All right, so that's where we get started. The next item on the list then is sati, the big one. And I say big one because it's all over the sutras. It's everywhere. You cannot traipse through the sutras without stumbling and falling over sati. An example is the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, right? So that's what they list. And this is the word mindfulness that we're talking about. But in the Pali, it's sati. And in the by the way, have you ever heard the word mindfulness used in English language in normal conversation that was not Dhamma?
No.
It's a Dhamma word. It's one of the very few English only full-on Dhamma words. But it doesn't translate sati correctly. And in fact, because mindfulness as a word is not in common language, it's got to be defined anyway. All right, so I'm making a distinction here between actual sati and mindfulness because I want to add a different quality in there. And that is that right view is deeply associated, noble right view is deeply associated with investigation of what's happening in the moment.
Uh-huh.
This is what is. Right view is not about whether Donald Trump's a good president or not, or whether or whether the Pope is handling his uh,
Yeah, that
business
whole
properly.
thing.
Or what,
Yeah.
yeah, that whole thing. That's not what we're talking about with this concept of what is right view. Right view has much more the quality of investigation, of noting, of seeing it, of putting two and two together. Some teachers say that you could do that as much as in a day, so that at the end of the day, that you would reflect upon what has happened today. But I would say that maybe that's for a really good Dhammarato, that's really a long time. In fact, by the end of the day, the beginning of the day is almost just in the past, and
Mm,
it's not a good idea to dwell too much in the past. So the investigations that we want to do, we want to investigate very closely what is happening right now and what just happened. And
mhm,
what just happened was the stuff that I missed that I need to now reflect upon. But we want to do it really quickly. But the whole quality of right view has to do with staying investigating.
mhm,
And that one of the qualities that we have in the world of what we call knowledge has to do with coming to a conclusion, that we investigate something and we come to a conclusion. If we hold that conclusion, it will be suffering. We need to do a reinvestigation to reconfirm that that's true. And then, in fact, we see that in science all over the place. There are literally tens of thousands of students of astronomy that really, really love to go, and they will go anywhere and everywhere they can in order to catch an eclipse. They really, really love eclipses.
mhm.
Why? Because it is here's the number one issue. The number one issue is gravitational lensing. That when the sun and is in a particular place, then the stars behind it can still be seen, except the sun is so bright that they're hard to see. But during an eclipse, when the sun is blotted out, then the gravitational lensing can be seen, which
Mm,
means that stars that are actually in reality and known to be through many years of catalogs and many years of re-investigation of where those stars actually are, and then in an eclipse, those stars move
mm.
because of the gravitational of, and that is such a surprise. It's so
Interesting.
mind-boggling that tens of thousands of people love to go see that every time. And in fact, at one point, I think that the Nobel Prize in physics for Einstein hung on whether or not that was going to be there because he predicted that this gravitational lensing would be there, that the stars behind the sun can actually be seen. Now, with the
Wow.
Hubble and really good telescopes, they can see gravitational lensing with entire galaxies. So when a galaxy is there, some of the stuff that's on that screen or on that image is not that galaxy. It's stuff behind the galaxy that has been gravitationally lensed around it so that the galaxies have halo effects to them.
That's wild.
I know. And and it is so wild that it has to be reinvestigated and reinvestigated, okay?
Ah,
When
yeah.
you start seeing the Dhamma like that, then you'll recognize, yes, we have to keep investigating, keep looking,
Mhm,
keep noticing. It's a real trip to see the fact that the mind does work the way that it does.
mhm.
Okay.
So
And it takes,
what are
go
some
ahead.
tools of doing that?
Pardon?
What are some tools of actually like putting into process doing the investigation?
That's the what we call paticca samuppada or
Okay.
paticca samuppada is actually the way that the mind works. All right. Um, and so, staying with this first better personality view, um, using Paticca shows us that we are not the kind of self that we thought we were, and Paticca in its deeper state or in its later state will show why we thought there was a self when in fact the self itself is nothing but a thought. And Descartes was wrong when he said, I think, therefore I am. And he would have been more correct when he would say, I think, therefore I think I am.
Okay.
Because that's what's really going on. We are because we think we are, not because we actually are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so Paticca shows us that sequence. Now, in the beginning of the Paticca, or the more foundational part of it, has to do with another teaching that the Buddha has, which is called the five aggregates. Now, the five aggregates are very, very similar to the four foundations of mindfulness: the body, the feelings, the mind, and its mind objects. But the five, you could go so far as to say that the four foundations of mindfulness are theoretically uh, structural, and that the five aggregates are functional.
Okay.
But they're describing the same thing. One is structural and the other one is functional. All right, now two of them are exactly the same. That's the body and the feelings. But in the five aggregates, we have three things that we had with the mind, of the mind and its mind's objects. Now we're actually going to look at what are the structures of the or the functions of the mind, and how do mental objects occur.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the five aggregates then are broken down to body, feeling, and three other things which are mental. I'll give them to you now: consciousness, perception, and I'll use the word to begin with, memory. So that how the mind works is that when we become when we become conscious of something in the sense of merely taking the input, and then we have to process it, and that processing is perception. You can actually look at the word perception, and you can see that perception means to see it, but we actually have two kinds of consciousness in English language, as well as two kinds of consciousness in the Pali, and they're the same thing. Let me give you a clear example of that. I see the tree, I see what you mean.
Uh,
Okay, I see the tree is pointing at a very basic um, sense organ function, the eye, and the associated part of the brain of optics, so that when you have an object that can be seen, then it's merely the seen, but it's not yet processed, let us say, to the point of having a label. In fact, when I say I see the tree, I've already processed it.
uh-huh.
It would better to be I see, and now it needs to be processed into a tree. But in order to be a tree and recognized as a tree, I have to have both the word tree and possibly many different examples of trees stored in my AI database so that I can come up with a concept of what trees are, because there's a wide variety of trees.
Uh-huh.
But I can still come up with the label of a tree. So that labeling or the noting of a tree is now a result or an outcome. That's a different kind of consciousness or a different way of seeing, because now we have kind of taken an object that was a real object and we have mentalized it.
Uh-huh.
Now, in English language, we would say, I realized it, but you don't realize it. You don't grow trees inside the brain.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we do not realize anything. No one has ever realized anything, but we do mentalize it. And we say that we realized it because what that means is our mentalization now fits closer and closer to what is really out there. And so what we do as human beings, just like all animals do, is that we go around living in a self-manufactured universe that's manufactured in the mind, and the more suffering there is means that the manufactured universe is different from the actual universe. And that the closer that we are in our perception of quality, so that we can come up with an internal realization that's very close to what's really real, then there is far less suffering.
Gotcha.
Okay, here's an example of that. Way back when I first started teaching Dhamma at Wat Suan Mok, there came a time during the meditation when someone came with chainsaws and cut a tree down. I don't remember exactly whether it was one tree or dozens of trees or whatever, but I do know that it was a big event.
Uh-huh.
Now, the sound of a chainsaw is just a sound, and I say the word chainsaw so that you can get the word there. But
Uh-huh.
what happens with all of these students who have cared enough about themselves and the environment to get themselves all the way to Thailand, and then they find out that the Thai locals are cutting down trees? Okay. And that's going to disturb the meditation. But you see, all of that comes inside the mind. That all the mind actually had was the buzz of the saw.
And that whole story.
Everything else, including this is a tree being cut down. I don't like trees being cut down because I like trees. Therefore, I would prefer to sit here and suffer
Right.
when all I've got, and the suffering is from a, oh gosh, hypocritical point of view, is they're bad because they cut down trees. And I don't cut down trees, so I'm better than they are. Never mind that I use paper. Okay, so that's a clear example of how we manufacture suffering in the mind, that actually the only thing that was there was the buzz.
Mm.
And in fact, it may have not been a chainsaw, but you know what chainsaws sound like, and I don't know of anything else that sounds quite like a chainsaw. You know, as they go like that. So all of those sounds are very characteristic of chainsaws.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not mean that when we hear a chainsaw that we have to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even have to use it. We don't even have to identify it as a chainsaw. Never mind chainsaw cutting a tree that I've never seen, but I still love it. All right. So we're working now with the five aggregates to recognize that the not liking of about that chainsaw came later in the mind, that in the beginning all the mind got was the sound of the chainsaw. The next thing that happened was the perception that happened that allowed us to know that this is in fact a chainsaw, that all we heard was just the sound.
Mm-hmm.
That's consciousness, to be able to hear a sound.
Mm-hmm.
And that one of the qualities that the Buddha talks about is to allow the sound to merely be the sound and the sight to be merely the sight, that we don't go all the way into full blown labeling, that we leave it at a very light perception level or no perception at all, that this is later stages, is to be able to bring the mind down to just be in the flood. Now, here's one of the things that is quality about perception. while we're perceiving or trying to figure things out, to figure out what they are in the mind using all of our past to do that, we're no longer focusing on new input. If we're not, that means we're missing something. So if we go to see, process, label, see, process, label, see, process, label, that processing and labeling time is the bigger part of the time. If I just leave it at seeing without taking a particular object that needs to be perceived and therefore understood, means that I can stay at a level where I'm just working with input. And that's when it becomes a flood. It becomes a flood because there's so much to see. I have literally at least 100 million leaves just right out there in front of me, right here in the forest.
Yeah.
And every one of them is dancing.
So when you would say, when you would just see, you're not seeing any one particular thing, you're just taking in all of the visual input without putting a label on it.
Exactly. Exactly so. Which is another way of saying it is not taking an object. Because if we take an object, that means we're taking it in order to perceive it so that we can see it and understand it. Okay? So that internal seeing is called salayatana, and it in not all descriptions of Paticca Samuppada have salayatana, because sometimes we go straight from perception without to the label without having an internal image of it or an internal representation. That in fact the word salayatana in other suttas is referred to as internal versus external. So the internal sense, the external sense sees the tree, but the internal sense sees a different tree that's based upon perception. The Buddha talks about it like this, that a tree is a tree with real limbs and real twigs and leaves, etc., like that. But there's a different kind of tree associated with it, and that tree is called the shadow of the tree. As the sun moves across the sky, the shadow of the tree will change in very, very big ways that the actual tree doesn't. That it takes a huge amount of wind to get a tree to really, really do a lot of dancing. But the shadow moves all over the ground. And the Buddha likens that to the internal way that the mind is, that the tree, the real tree, the one that the eye sees, is on the outside and it's real. But the tree that we make on the inside is absolutely nothing but a shadow of a tree. And not only that, but it is as easily destroyed as the shadow of a tree. A cloud can destroy the shadow of a tree. Just a little bit of time will distort and change and destroy the shadow of the tree. But the tree remains. The tree is real. Okay, so this is getting an idea. The Buddha was really, really spot on when he was talking about how perhaps the human mind is useful, but it is not very accurate.
Yeah.
Not a very good representation. And not only that, but you could go so far as to say, well, in modern technology, we now have cameras. We have film cameras and digital cameras. Yes, but the picture of a tree is not the same thing as a tree.
That's true.
Yeah, picture of a tree is not a tree. So my understanding of the tree is not the tree. It's only my understanding of the tree. Now I'm beginning to recognize, what's on the inside and what's on the outside. All right, so let's take these 5 things, these what we call 5 aggregates, And one of the major ways that the Buddha used these five aggregates was not just because it's part of Paticca Samuppada, the full path, but that these are constituent components that you can see. You know you've got these things inside. You know there's a body. You know there are feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you can see things, okay, that you have sensory input. You know that you have memories and that you know that you can figure things out. You can perceive things.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now that we know that those things actually exist because you have had evidentiary um, flood every day, that these things are so well understood and so well known to be there that we rely upon them solidly without even considering the fact that they're there.
Okay.
All right. And so, because of that, we begin to confuse it and start to think of those things as a collection or individually or parts or whatever as me.
Mm-hmm.
But with a bit of investigation through the Dhamma, we can begin to see that I am not this body. Jesus knew that too when he said, you cannot change your stature 1 inch.
Hmm.
You are not the body. If you were the body, then you would be the master of the body. You would be a changeling.
That's a
You
good
could be
point.
young when you want to be young, and you're old when you want to be young, and a pissant when you want to crawl around, and a fly on the wall, and anything you wanted to be if you were really the body.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
best we can say is whatever I am is housed in this body, and I've got very, very little control over it.
Mm-hmm. That's wild. So I need to go to bed, but so just to wrap things up, what like what should I understand what I should kind of start looking for, but should like I've heard of noting being one thing. Is that something that I should start doing, or is that something that's later on? Like what are some like general questions I should ask myself throughout the day?
Just okay. Basically, I was going off in this direction, but you've cut me short. So let's finish up with the
Sure.
five aggregates on
Yeah.
another talk. Because I've introduced that stuff to you anyway. Let's go right to that point. One of the major problems with the Mahasi method is the students do not understand the quality of noting correctly.
Uh-huh.
Because the noting that we're talking about is so close to labeling, like you write a note to yourself. The example that I often use is the example of a witness. There are two different kinds of witnesses. There is the witness who sees what happened, and there's the witness who tells the story of what happened on the witness stand.
Okay.
All right. So if you think of those two witnesses that are compressed together, the first witness sees what happens, and the second witness, through perception, labels, defines, etc., like that. All right. The Mahasi method then is trying to teach the students how to do the first kind of witness, but because of language problems and many, many other issues, we tend to think of that the Mahasi method is talking about the second kind of witness, the noting. Okay, and that they have four classic starting positions for the noting: rising, falling, touching, sitting. All right. But rising is just the rising of the chest with breathing. It's an in breath. Falling is the out breath. Touching is means that you can feel the whatever touches the body. You can feel the cloth. You can feel the floor. You can feel the gravity. You can feel the breeze. It touches. And the sitting then is also the understanding of the body posture. It's actually more of a kinesthetic, an
Yeah.
internal position. For an example of that is close your eyes for a second. Put your hand up in the air, either one of them. It doesn't matter. Do you know where that hand is?
Maybe. I think
Okay, well
so.
you can feel it right now.
Yeah.
Open your eyes and look at it. Is it where you thought it was?
Yep.
All right, what kind of thinking did you use to think that you knew where it was without your eyes?
My kinesthetic awareness.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the sitting, just
Mhm.
sitting. To become aware of the body in a general way, in the sense of its positions, its postures, its movements, all of that kind of stuff. All right. But the touching, sitting, rising, falling, the students then will start doing too much labeling. All right. What we want to be able to do is notice as much stuff as we can. And by doing that means that we're much more focused on the sensories than we are on the processing.
Mm.
Another way of looking at it is Paticca Samuppada is best understood from the end coming down towards the beginning. And that the end of it is when things have gone really wrong.
Mm.
All right, too late. So this is a time sequence. And in fact, the Buddha talks about the mind as being very fast.
Mm.
In fact, one of the sutras, he says, the mind is so fast, O monks, I don't even have an analogy for how fast the mind is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowadays, we have analogies, but they fall apart.
Mhm.
Here's a clear example of it. You know what the planet Saturn looks like with the
Yep.
rings and all of that, okay? The speed of light is such that the light from Saturn coming to the Earth would take something like 30 minutes.
Yeah. So.
But you went to Saturn in your mind and right back again. That's how fast.
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how fast the mind is. You can go. So you're much faster than the speed of light in that physical kind of way.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So because the mind is so fast, what we want to do is we want to be able to get the mind in tune so that we can back up in that time frame. And one of the places that people will do it. Gosh, I'm getting into a long lecture now. Forgive me. I'll finish it up later. You can imagine a man and a wife that are
Yeah.
having an argument. They're really going after it, and then the husband will say something that he recognizes as just wrong. I want out of here, and
Mm.
so he leaves the room and he slams the door. All right, that means that he became mindful at the point of tanha. He was already in it.
Mm.
If he had been able to see things early, like when his wife said one thing and he didn't like it, if he knew about that feeling and had wisdom at the point when she first contacted him, he would have never gotten into the argument.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a backup. All right. If he can back up even sooner than that, then he will see his wife, he will hear her, but he will not process what he heard that contacted him that made him angry.
Hmm.
So everything is a sequence of events. And so the first thing that happens in that sequence is the eye sees the tree or the hearing. We hear something, we don't understand it yet. We're not listening, we're just hearing.
Mm-hmm.
It takes this
Mm-hmm.
quality of perception. Well, guess what? That quality of perception is not you. Consciousness is not you.
Hmm.
All of your memories are not you, and in fact, they're faulty. And
Yeah.
we'll talk about that at a later time. But all of these aggregates are not you. And so this is what you would. The question now, getting back to your question, what should I start to pay attention to? The answer is start paying attention to the way the mind works, and we'll go through that in great detail.
Gotcha.
But when you start paying attention to things, that means that you're no longer going to, with the wrongly or incorrectly way of doing Mahasi is going to the full labeling. You can only label what one thing every 5 or maybe 2 seconds if you're fast. But in that 2 second time, if you are aware of what's going on, you can note or witness many, many things without doing the processing that it takes because you're not taking an object. So start to examine that, to
So,
recognize that there's a flood of stuff happening that you're not paying attention to while you're processing one of the objects that came by.
so would I be using those 4 words that we were talking about? The rising, falling, sitting, and feeling?
Touching,
Touch.
rising, falling, touching, feeling, sitting. No, um, actually, yes, I have done that to just move from those four things. But that's very, very basic introduction. And when I started to say no, I was going to say no because you're beyond that. But no, let's go back and start doing some of that stuff.
Okay.
All right. Rising, falling is the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Becoming in breath and out breath.
Mm-hmm.
The touching is what the whole body is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the sitting is the proprioceptic system of the expression of where the body is. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you could also think of these four things exactly as the four steps of Anapanasati as listed by the Buddha.
Okay.
Rising, falling, touching means experiencing the whole body. In fact, you could say that both the touching and the sitting would be stage 3 of Anapanasati. So these are very good things to do. But in order to do that, you have to constantly bring the mind out of the hindrances back to being able to watch the rising, falling, touching,
Yeah.
sitting. The question is, how are you going to bring the mind back? Are you going to bring the mind back joyfully? Are
Mm.
you going to bring the mind back with reluctance? Oh, gosh, this is such hard work.
The first one.
All right, all right.
um,
That's the change of attitude that you need.
so when I'm feeling or touching or sensing rising and falling, do I just pick one of those? Because obviously, like multiple of those things are going to be happening at once. Do I just pick one and just kind of go with that for
With
a while?
within one in within one breath, within one inhale and one outhale, you should be able to do all four of them.
Mm, okay, got it. All right, I'll
Within
start
one,
working with that.
right, and not only that, but in one in breath out breath sequence, you should be able to recognize a whole lot more than that. But
Mm,
that's the way to get started:
got
rising, falling, touching, sitting.
got it, got
And
it.
then it'll be mind rising, falling, touching, sitting, wandering. Oops, up, back again. Rising, falling, touching, sitting. Okay.
All right.
Rising, falling, touching, sitting. Oh, that's a nice breeze. And then you start.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your
All
time.
right. All right. Well, we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. See ya.